Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this gorgeous planet that we all share together. My name is HundrED, and I am here today with my amazing and super inspiring crew and friends, Hanneke Mackie from Bus Kids in South Africa, and Sherelle Druppers from Cheza in Kenya. And we're so excited to have you join us. Today, we are diving into an extraordinary initiative that is part of the prestigious HundrED Global Collection, Embedding Wellness in Ethiopian Schools. This inspiring project is part of Link Education International. And our guest today is Samantha Ross, who is the Executive Director at Link Education. Samantha is a true leader in educational development. With over 20 years of experience in education and international development across Africa and Asia, she has dedicated her career to improving education systems so that everyone can benefit equally from a quality and safe education. Since joining Link Education in 2011, Samantha has played a crucial role in designing, developing, and delivering high-quality programs that create real, lasting impact. As one of the female educators who was part of one of Link Education's program states, they say if you give a man a fish, you feed him for one day. If you teach a man to fish, you give him food for life. Just like the project changed our lives forever. It brings change for a lifetime. They have given what cannot be lost. No one can take it away from us. My goodness, isn't that such a powerful way to give words to real impact? It's like quotes like these that show us how deep and lasting the change can be when education is done right. And now it's time for us to sit back and listen to Samantha talk. So hi, Samantha. We would love for you to take us back in time to 2011. Tell us the story of how you came to join Link Education International and what your journey has been like for you.
Hi, that's quite an intro. Lovely to hear all of that. Thank you. So I started with Link in 2011. Like you say, I met the chair of the board on a dog walk, and the rest is history, so they say. And I've had a brilliant time working with Link. I often say it's the best job in Scotland, for me anyway. So I feel very fortunate and privileged to be part of the Link family. We've always worked in system strengthening and have always believed in ensuring that any work we do, any support we give is sustainable and hopefully scalable if the right parameters are in place for governments to take work forward. Over the years, we've always focused on school improvement planning and ensuring that the community is part of that. I mean, probably in every school or every society around the world, parents and the community is a really integral part of a strong education system. So Link really believes in that community engagement part of supporting schools. And that links into the sustainability part as well. We all know that governments never have enough money for their education systems, and communities, again, can really help plug that gap. So we've worked in school improvement planning, we've worked in community engagement, and then we've worked or moved towards this more inclusion in the broadest sense to ensure that all marginalized, vulnerable people on the edges have the rights to or can access their right to education. And this particular work is very much focused on girls. So we had some amazing funding from FCDO, the British government, which is part of the Girls' Education Challenge, which was life-changing, has been life-changing for millions of girls across the globe. And a really progressive piece of funding. I mean, how many governments can you name that would give a singular project 12 years of funding? I mean, it is amazing. And from that piece of funding, we've really been able to develop, adapt, and really drive forward this social and emotional learning piece of work in Ethiopia.
That is so inspiring, Samantha. And I read a lot about linked education. The more I read, the more I there was just more pieces and more pieces, and you sit at the helm of quite a number of organizations that form part of Link Education. And that's often government, as you said, and local organizations. And that seems like such a big job. And what I really felt quite inspired by is the slogan being so powerful and simple on the website, saying it's about making education better. so the children learn the skills to improve their lives. And it's something I actually struggle with in our own organization. How do you say a thing so simply? And you've shared a little bit about one of the programs that you're currently doing in Ethiopia, but I understand that Link does a lot more. I've read about strengthening leadership and governance, enhancing teaching quality, improving learning environments, supporting community action, challenging inequality. And we just want to know a little bit more in terms of these programs and the operations that you can share with us, because it seems like you are doing an awful lot and it's very inspiring. So tell us more about the rest of the projects that Link is involved in and how you are at the helm of all of that, Samantha.
Yeah, of course. So I wouldn't say at the helm. I guess I'm just holding a few strings together, but I'm really working or supporting the teams in the other countries we operate in. So we're a kind of family or collective of organizations. So there's Link, who happens to be based in Scotland. And then there's Link Community Development Malawi, Link Community Development Uganda, Link Education Ethiopia. So we're kind of the core family, if you like, the nuclear family. And then we work with other partners. So we had quite a big project, again, FCDO funded in Malawi, where we worked with 5 other Malawian partners. We have another Scottish government funded project at the moment, which is working in Rwanda and Zambia and Malawi. And we're working with another 3 local partners there. So all of the partners we work with have very similar values.
Something really interesting from your story is the word model, but also the word social emotional learning, because social and emotional learning is the framework that we use in Cheza. But what's unique about us is that we teach social and emotional learning through movement. And so this is very localized to the context, but social and emotional learning, this framework, is really something that comes from the US, but can be localized and can be very effective. And when you talked about these models and really working with government, can you share a little bit about how do you localize certain models or education frameworks to actually adapt to the context of like you said, Ethiopia or Uganda?
Probably back in 2014, 2015, which was the end of the first phase of this Girls' Education Challenge project. And we had really good, in fact, we'd had our numeracy impact. The girls had improved by 301% numeracy from baseline. Literacy was 198%. So crazy figures, amazing. And we really wanted to unpack how had that happened. So we looked at teacher training, leadership training, community engagement. But one of the things that really stood out, both in the quantitative and primarily the qualitative data collection for the N line, was the counselling piece of work we were doing. And that was back in the days before we really knew what social and emotional learning was. And we recognized that the girls needed support to access learning in the classroom, but it needed more than just teaching, more than just a textbook, more than just your parents encouraging you. There was something that was missing. And the counselling piece was the bit that girls were saying was the kind of boost they needed to get them into the classroom and listening. And then we did a bit more research and came across the social emotional learning piece that, as someone said at the beginning, seemed to generate from the States and was very kind of northern based in how it was first constructed. So we worked with a consultant based in the UK, but who had spent 20 plus years in Ethiopia in teaching practice and was married to an Ethiopian. So was very embedded within the Ethiopia environment and context. And we worked with him and with the team we have in Ethiopia to develop a social and emotional learning model that then was shared with the relevant government departments in the region we were working in to make sure it was very contextually appropriate and based on the model that the Ethiopian government wanted to embed into their system when they had funding available. So it wasn't our model, it was an Ethiopian model that we kind of adapted and worked with them to make it work within Ethiopia. And then we used that in the Stages program, which is the second part of the Girls' Education Challenge, phase 2, again, to great effect, and have had really strong learning outcomes again for the Stages project. Around 2017, we had another fund from FCDO for a Girls' Education Challenge, again, project in Malawi, looking at the highly, highly marginalized girls, multiply marginalized. There were girls to start with. They were often had a disability. They might be young mothers. They might be head of a household. They might be all of those things. And we were helping those girls who had dropped out of school and never achieved functional literacy or numeracy, or had never been to school in the first place. So really vulnerable young people, to get them to a point where they could either re-enter primary school at grade 5, which is part of the Malawian system in non-formal education, or if they were older, so 17, 18, maybe even 19, they didn't want to go back into a classroom of 10 or 11-year-olds. It was then giving them pathways that they could then go on to do some vocational training. So the social, emotional and learning model that we had used in Ethiopia was shared with the Malawi team, and the Malawi team, along with the Malawian Institute of Education, was then adapted for this non-formal sector. And it was in ways that, so using examples that these Malawian girls would really be able to relate to, was really relevant for their lives. And we found that they were attending, once they'd done the course, the attendance increased. In Malawi, we added netball to it as well. Netball's a really popular sport in Malawi, so that gave them another reason to want to come along to these learning sessions. And during the netball, they were discussing how to work in a team, group work, how to make good decisions. So all of these kind of tenets of social and emotional learning as we understand it. So that was very successful. And then we had a small piece of funding for some work in Uganda. And interestingly, the country director in Uganda worked with Gender Task Force within the Ministry of Education in Uganda. And they basically said, look, we have this piece of work, this kind of model. We know you want to improve life skills learning in Uganda. Is this model something you'd be interested in? And the Gender Task Force looked at it and they said, this model looks like it will work, but we need to tweak it so that it's not just focusing on girls, it also focuses on boys. So there's a big issue around adolescents' pregnancies in Uganda. Often looks at the girl as being the one that needs to sort that out. Uganda, I think, were quite progressive and enlightened and recognized the importance of boys in pregnancy. So the social and emotional learning model was then adapted with the Gender Task Force to ensure that anything that was very much girl-focused was much more gender-neutral focused, I guess. And that's a very small pilot that we've just undertaken with the ministry in Uganda. It's had great success with bringing in back to school girls who are young mothers, but also boys. There's some really nice case studies around boys who were young fathers who were being rejected by their local community as well, coming back into school and becoming head of the class and becoming kind of class leaders, etc., and really feeling that their self-esteem and what they can contribute to their community had really increased and improved. And that's what I think education's all about, is wanting to know what you can do to make your life good for yourself, but also for your community, give you these options and opportunities, kind of just open those doors for you to do whatever you want, whether it's an academic pathway or anything else, but know that you have the confidence and the knowledge and the right, and to follow your dream and follow the rights, achieve the rights that you're enabled to.
You guys talk about skills that children need to succeed in education. And that's such a wonderfully broad term. You've spoken a lot about social emotional, about literacy skills and mathematics and things like this going up. And this is such an interesting topic that has come up in many of our episodes in the conversations about what are the skills? There's no finite list, right, that children might need for them to help them improve their futures. And it also depends on what their starting line is. And one of our previous guests just last week said he'd like just really wish for funders and governments to start looking at education just beyond numeracy and literacy. So it's so wonderful to see that you guys are working in such a wide way with so many communities. I'm someone who believes, that the skills that we're going to need in the future, I'm doubling down on things like the ability to come up with an original idea, because, AI might be able to even replace our ability to kind of write grammatically correctly. So I guess there isn't a particular list of skills that Link is focused on. What is your feeling about future skills and what's most important for children?
Yeah, so it is quite a broad term, isn't it? In fact, we were talking about this only this morning, because I don't know if anyone's attending the CS conference next month, but it's about digital access to education. And we were talking today about how we don't support digital access to education only because the contexts we're working in don't have access to electricity, let alone access to any kind of tablet, smartphone, network, etc., TVs, etc. Which isn't to say that we're Luddites and we don't believe in digital education. We see that there is a place for it. We have big reservations around the inequities we think that will increase as digital education is rolled out globally. So I guess it's a roundabout way to answer your question, in that 21st century skills, I think being able to come up with a good idea is a great one. Innovation is great. I also think, and maybe I will sound a Luddite when I say this, but I think a skill in maintaining your curiosity, not being afraid to ask questions, having the ability to dream. It sounds a bit cliched, but I think having the ability to dream and having the confidence, the ideas, and the strength to follow that dream, no matter what it is. And that could be the dream of being a really good parent and giving your kids an education or good access to good health, or just a really fun life. Or it could be going to university, or it could be starting your own business. It could be multiple things. But I think instilling in kids or young people the notion that nothing can stop them, that the world is their oyster.
What would be like a great way to practice these kind of skills, like not killing curiosity, but keeping it alive, and how to be a good parent? I love that you said that. That's like beautiful. Those are skills that are not just for school, but those are skills for life. So it's beyond. Can you give some examples of how you could practice that?
Wow. I mean, yeah, I haven't thought about how this might actually work in the classroom. But I think, one of the final questions I think we might get onto is about the future of education, which I get this is leading to. And building curiosity was one of the things I wanted to share about that. But I guess how children might be able to practice that, and how that might look in the future of education, would be having a much freer education system. Having a system that's not really bound by a curriculum and by tests, a system that's more Finnish, that we're all a little bit familiar with, and where there aren't any exams, where teachers, educators, facilitators, whatever you might want to call them, are really respected in the community as being the people who can instill curiosity and wisdom and the excitement of opportunity in young people. That's not really answering your question. So I guess how can it be practiced would be having more open discussions in classrooms where answers aren't really incorrect. It's more an exploration. So it would be an exploration of what can a future look like.
Myself and Sherelle here, and our co-host who's not on today, Lindsay, we all work in arts interventions. And my vote would be wholeheartedly make children just be exposed to the arts more. I've been talking so much about this in this forum and other places. Why do I believe it so firmly? And I think it's when I went and studied further after school, and I had the opportunity to immerse myself so much in a arts degree, and it made me so human. So able to say what I feel and ask my question and follow my curiosity and be more open and dream and all those beautiful things you said. And I don't really know how to prove it yet, but by golly, we're trying to help make that connection for people, that the arts somehow magically does that for children. That's my vote, just FYI.
But it's actually really beautiful, because although we're talking about different contexts, there is something very universal that we feel or we hear in this story. So like this aspect of confidence or well-being. And Annette, you're doing this with your school in Norway, but Hanneke is working in South Africa and I'm working in Kenya, but still there's these universal values for, I think, every child that we can instill. And of course, it has to be adapted to the context and we have to be sensitive to that. But I do hear in your story something very universal that we can all relate to. And we feel that every child needs these type of skills in their life.
I would love to hear an example of like one of your favorite success stories. So take us to Ethiopia or take us to any place and help us visualize one of Link Education International's success stories.
Well, I've got one that springs to mind, but it's going to be one of those classic things where I tell this story and then we close and then I'm making dinner tonight. I'm like, why didn't I say that? Anyway, and it is related to Ethiopia and is related to social emotional learning, which is kind of handy. So there is a girl in Ethiopia, lives in rural Ethiopia. So we're working in the southern Ethiopian region in Wolaita zone, and she was living in one of the village communities in what we termed a deep rural area. For this particular project, we actually had to build 4 secondary schools, which was something we didn't want to ever undertake because challenges around construction, I'm sure you can envisage, are huge, especially in rural areas. Anyway, so we had constructed a secondary school and she still lived many, many kilometers away from this secondary school. She had finished primary and was evidently very bright, but her mother had died, her father had remarried, and collectively together, the mother and father had decided that there was no reason for her to continue her education anymore. I mean, she's a girl, so what's the point anyway? And she, a girl, wasn't very happy with this and really wanted to attend school. She argued her case and wanted to go to secondary school, but there was no funding within the family to send her. So even though schooling is generally free in the countries we work in, there's always these hidden costs, these additional costs around uniform, textbooks, etc., and sitting for exams. Anyway, she convinced them to go. And fortunately, Link was there to help her with some basic needs. And that was around uniform, textbooks, but also around sanitary pads, so that she could not miss school during menstruation. Anyway, she did really well. She passed her first level of secondary school and she wants to transition to the final years of secondary school, which is where she encountered the social emotional learning program. And in this project, we had again tweaked the social emotional learning program. So it was focused more on STEM, because the government had recognized that there were very few girls going into STEM subjects, and that was having a kickback on role models for future generations coming through. She excelled in the STEM project and was really fascinated by science, is now at Sodo University, which is the capital city of the region we were working in, the zone we were working in, and is now taking a medical degree. And I think is in her second year in. So that's a really great success story from someone who was at primary and was just about to drop out to managing to go through the whole 6 years of secondary school and is now at university and hoping to become a doctor and then return back to her community to support them there. So it's individual stories like that I find really inspiring. The kind of system strengthening, the working with government, looking at curriculum and teacher training materials are all excellent, but they can be a bit dry sometimes. But when you know that the impact of all of that work can really make a difference for people, and, she will, the impact on her is immense. On her family and peer group is great, but on her community as well, she will go back and be a role model and inspiration for dozens of people. And that's so powerful, I think.
Yes, these are the stories that keeps us going and give us purpose. When I listened to you, I wanted to go back actually to the person, like, who is Sam, because we heard this beautiful introduction of Annette, 20 years in education specialist. So what sparked this love for education, and what made you want to do this?
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if I had an inspiring teacher I could refer to and, oh, it was Mrs. So-and-so. No, I don't have that. I think I guess the older I get, the more I recognize that education is the door, I think, to anything you choose in life. And I say education in a very broader sense, and not necessarily meaning education where you're sat in a classroom listening to a teacher. It could be something you're learning in a forest from an elder that you're taking a walk with. It could be absolutely anything. But knowledge, I guess knowledge is the key to doing what you want in life, to making your life what you want it to be. And so I loved further education that I took. I took a qualification in teaching English as a foreign language, so traveled in many countries doing that. And then came back to the UK to do a master's in education and development. And that's when I got really turned on by how you can support education not being on the front line. I found teaching in front of a classroom of children very challenging. It didn't really suit my personality. And for a long time, I thought that was the only option you had for education. You were a teacher and then you were a head teacher, and that was kind of it. So knowing that there were lots of other ways of making education systems better for more types of children, there was a real light bulb moment for me. So I did a master's at the University of East Anglia and then did a PhD there as well. And that really helped me think through how we understand the various contexts that people are operating within and how I might be able to help.
I'm just quite curious and was excited to ask you, as someone who works on my continent, on our continent, beloved Africa, what your thoughts are for its future, just your own personal thoughts. I sway between worry, of course, and great hope for Africa. And someone who's worked so deeply and so widely, I could really get emotional now, across a number of African countries. If you look at what is predicted around the workforce, they say by 2050, half of young people will be on this continent. Are we too far behind? Or is there a world in which Africa might even be a world power? You work in very deprived areas. I'm sitting from a perspective of a middle of the road country like South Africa, where there's a lot of privilege. What do you think the future holds with this workforce going to be so big here? What do you think what's coming for Africa?
Great things, I hope.
Yay!
Yeah, people are so inspiring. I was in Malawi at the end of January for a couple of weeks, and everywhere you go, people are getting on with stuff when they don't have much around them. They just get on with it and they make it work. And I think that ability to adapt and be resourceful and make things happen and get things done when around them it's all really challenging sometimes, I think gives them the best chance of ensuring that the future for them will be bright. Where in places in the world where we've been privileged and have everything around us at a flick of a switch or whatever, we're the ones that are really going to suffer when it all goes a bit wrong, which is kind of going a bit wrong at the moment. So in that sense, trying to be optimistic, I think it's a continent of great innovation and inspiration and resourcefulness.
We have one final question that we asked all our guests, and we've heard you talk about this already, but it's such a big question, and I can't wait to hear your answer. So, what is your dream for the future of education? Please share it with us.
Okay, my dream for the future of education would be no exams, respected teachers who are well paid for what they do, which is to support our children in the most formative times of their lives, to have a system that is child-centered and led by the young people that you have in front of you, isn't dictated by people that sit in capital cities in the middle of government, who are often so far removed from what's actually happening in schools across their nation. They really shouldn't have a voice in how things move forward. So I guess education systems that are much more localized and decentralized, so they really speak to the issues that are happening to that community around them. Education systems where parents play a strong role as well in supporting schools, supporting teachers, not in a meddling way, but in a supportive way, where schools are able to draw on the resources they have around them within the parents and the communities, and a system where young people and their ideas and their curiosity are celebrated. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Here. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. Well, thank you so much for those words. We are so grateful that you wanted to be our guest today.
Thank you for the work you do, Sam. Thank you for the beautiful work.
Well, to you all as well. It was lovely to see your faces again after seeing them last in Finland, but I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Do you have an education innovation you want to share with the world? The call for the 2026 Global Collection is now open. Apply at HundrED.org.